During what turned out to be an accidental turning point at a bachelor party weekend in New Orleans in 2012, Chris Heinz started running. And like a modern day Forrest Gump, he started running and running and running. Check out this stat. He has run a 5K or greater at least once a month for 11 years straight and amassed nearly 300 total races during that time. During the pandemic, he started running every single day. Since April 20th of 2020, Chris has not missed a single day of running, not one. So it felt natural that this episode would be about those elusive leadership traits of discipline and consistency. How do we get better at these qualities and turn them into repeated skills, or better yet, habits? This is Level Up Leadership with my guest today, Chris Heinz. Chris, I'm excited to talk to you today, man.
Absolutely, I am too.
Yeah, our conversation today is sparked by some text messages we sent back and forth. You were mentioning that you were listening to one of the Level Up podcast episodes while you run.
Mhm.
And we just kind of got on this topic about the consistency and the discipline of running. And then it became this whole conversation about consistency and discipline for leadership. And as you know, this podcast is about me learning as a leader. So that means I have a lot to grow in this area of discipline and consistency. So I'm hoping I learn a few nuggets from you. And hey, maybe I'll teach you one thing. I'm gonna write it down
Guarantee
if I
it's
get
gonna be
it.
mutual.
Yeah. So let's dig into that, and I'd love to actually talk about your practices in discipline, and let's start with the jogging. You literally do this every day, or
Every single day now.
for how long?
So I'm gonna give you the quick backstory on this.
Mhm.
It was in 2012. I decided I need to lose some weight,
Mhm.
and a friend and I were going to the Final Four down in New Orleans.
Yeah.
And he told me, no matter what we do on Bourbon Street, no matter how much fun we have, or no matter how much we drink, we're going to work out each morning.
Yeah.
And I was in a couple months into my weight loss, but I had not added exercise to the mix.
Mhm.
The first morning, after we had a good time on Bourbon Street, he goes, "We're going to go for a 15-minute run." I'm like, "Okay, I can do that." Well, James, 45 minutes later, he finally decides we're going to turn around. And this is New Orleans in April with 147 degrees and 190% humidity. So
Yeah.
I didn't die. I was dry heaving a little bit, but because I didn't die, I decided, okay, I can run a little bit.
Mhm.
And I started adding running to the mix just a little.
Yeah.
And I didn't stop. I didn't do it every day at the point, but actually I found it as a great habit to build.
Mhm.
Flash forward to a couple months later, my wife is like, if you're going to run, why not run for a cause?
Mhm.
So my very first race was a half marathon in Vegas to raise money for the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation.
Mhm.
It was a double win. I got to go to Vegas. I got to run the strip where they shut the strip down so you could run on it.
Yeah.
And I got to
That's
do
cool.
it for an incredible cause. And I thought I would be one and done. That'd be my only race. And then I'll just do my running around my neighborhood. Well, since then, I have run at least a 5K every single month for 11 years now. I've run
What?
almost 300 races in every imaginable distance
Yeah.
because it's just become a way of life.
Holy
Then
smokes.
I added to that. Remember that little thing called COVID,
Yeah.
where the world shut
Yeah.
down?
Yeah, I recall. I read something about that.
Yeah, something, right? Well, when the world shut down, we were in Salt Lake visiting a college for our son and had to get back on a plane. And at that point, I was running 3 to 4, maybe 5 days a week.
Mhm.
Well, I decided I'm home. I'm working from right where I'm working now. Why not run every day?
Mhm.
So since I believe it was April 20th of 2020, I've ran every single day and have not missed one.
Yeah.
That's included races. That's included 2 24-hour runs where I still ran the next day.
Yeah.
that's included running in about 4 different time zones in about 3 days because it's
Hmm.
just part of who I am. Now it's not a I'm going to run, I am running. So that
Hmm.
consistency is now just embedded into me.
Yeah. It's mind-boggling, Chris. I don't know that there's anything that I do every single day with that. I mean, besides automatic things like
That's right.
brushing your teeth, um, I honestly can't see. I don't know. There are a few things I do, and I guess for anybody listening to our conversation here, we should clarify your profession is not running.
No,
You're not in any way affiliated to the industry or the business of running. We are in the same industry, which is
yep,
taking care of seniors and families and the people who work in this industry.
that's right. That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah,
So,
I'm not sponsored by anybody. This is just me.
yeah. Well, maybe, maybe this podcast will reach the right audience and you'll
There we
start
go.
to, you know what? If Nike is listening to this podcast episode, look up our man, Chris. Um, so, actually, for our listeners' benefit, tell me a little bit about your organization today. What's your daytime job?
Sure. So the day job is I lead a recruiting firm called Westport One.
Hmm.
And what we do is we help companies find the right senior living leadership talent, whether that be at the community leadership level and above corporate and the regional and the corporate level. We help them find that right leadership talent from coast to coast.
Hmm. Yeah. That's amazing. So you see at a macro level and also at the micro level because you have to hire for individual people. But I would imagine, Chris, that over time you see some major trends of what makes for a really great leader in our space specifically.
Absolutely. And how it
Yeah.
evolves just in short amount of times. I mean,
Hmm.
just in the last 3 years, what that leader looks like and how that has evolved. We see those trends in real time.
Hmm. Um, I have to ask because the question popped into my brain about is there some secret sauce? Are there some elements to this? I know, obviously people want to you want people to come to you for your help, but what could you give away in
Mhm.
terms of like, these are some things that we see as an organization that are pretty critical to whoever you're going to bring on as a leader for your senior care organization.
Yeah, really, there's two things. One is getting them. That's one challenge. The other is keeping them.
Mhm.
So, putting those into different words, it's the recruiting or the hiring process, and then it's the retention process.
Mhm.
One is not successful without the other, but both are critical by themselves.
Mhm.
So from the hiring process, the biggest thing that we see that makes a difference in a successful process and getting the candidate that they want to fill the
Mhm.
role is the process that they follow.
Mhm.
And what I mean by that is that interview process from when they first engage with a candidate saying, "Hey, we might be interested in talking,"
Mhm.
to the end time frame of when they actually say, "We love you, we'd like to make an offer."
Mhm.
The successful companies are those that have a very consistent process that they follow,
Yeah.
and they have a very succinct process that they follow from a time frame standpoint.
Mhm.
So that's the biggest thing that we see is that process that's followed on the front end of getting them.
Mhm.
Well, the real hitting ingredient is on the back end, which is keeping them, that
Yeah.
retention factor. And consistency really is a strong attribute when it comes to that retention. Because one of the biggest things that we hear from candidates as to why they
Mhm.
want to leave is they don't have any communication.
Hmm.
They
Yeah.
get the big picture. Okay, we need to get occupancy up to X level. But they don't get the why, they don't get the stories, they don't get the support that makes the difference for them to want to put that extra effort out.
Yeah. Man. There's so much I want to say here. There's a few things. One, I'm almost having a triggered moment of like the big picture and the example that you gave of we need occupancy to be X percent because to me that's part of the issue. That's part of the challenge of our industry, is that these elements become the big picture when they in fact
Mhm.
are not. They're executing some of the big picture. However, like, occupancy comes and goes, and
Mhm.
I've been recruited to organizations with those exact premises of like, let's get to know each other. Here's a lot of character kind of swapping, get to know you. Great, we like you, I like them back. It's all of those things, and then here are the major problems that we're faced with, and hope you can tackle those as quickly as possible. And then you're right, like it feels like there's the dating part of it, and then
Mhm.
it's like, okay, now we're official, and then all of that stuff went out of the window, and it's like,
Yeah,
we're together now. So there aren't dinners out and roses and meals made. It's no, no, now it's just, we just gotta get your job done.
that's right. Yeah,
Hmm.
culture is not the words that they put on a website of these are our values.
Hmm.
Culture is the daily interaction with their team. That's
Yeah,
what creates the culture.
consistency.
That's right.
Yeah, yeah, it's something, we talk about, and we really look at on our team too. I talk about it a lot on LinkedIn. Is that culture? Somebody used this phrase. I wish I could attribute it to the right person, but they use the phrase culture artifacts.
Mhm.
And culture artifacts are like, you walk into a building or an office and you see the culture artifacts. You see the posters, you see the award, you see the value statements. These are artifacts of culture. They are
Yep.
not, in fact, real culture, because culture is the observed norms, behaviors, expectations. I call it the secret handshake of an organization. It's the thing that you just do over and over and over again.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's right.
So we aren't what we say we're going to do. We are what we actually do.
That's right. And
Yeah.
doing it all the time, not just
Hmm.
one time for the sake of a platitude, but that it is something that you do on a consistent basis.
Hmm. Man, I'm curious from your perspective, because you see so many organizations, and clearly you are a fan of senior living, aging
Yeah.
space, or otherwise you'd go do this business somewhere else. So, notwithstanding your affection for the industry, maybe you can highlight some of the things that, maybe these are some hard truths we need to talk about so that we can change it and make it better. If I had to put these in kind of a what grinds your gears kind of category when it comes
Mhm.
to senior living culture, maybe an industry culture, what are we not doing well from your viewpoint that we really need to get better at?
Well, I think one of the biggest things is the illustration of actual caring for their teams.
Hmm.
And like you said, when you're in that dating mode or you're in that honeymoon mode, you get all the warm fuzzies, but that day in day outside, that grind breaks. Oopsie, that grind breaks people down.
Yeah.
So showing that care is not just words, but it's the actions as well. And
Hmm.
again, time and time again, when we talk to candidates, it's not that they're looking to move just for the sake of making a move.
Hmm.
They're looking to make a move because they just don't feel that they're being treated right, that they're being shown the care beyond just a number.
Hmm.
And that breaks down that retention. I could give you two crazy stats from a retention standpoint.
Okay.
So I started in this recruiting business back in 1997. It's crazy to say I started in the 20th century. Well, a stat that was shared with me there, I'm a big analytics guy, but a stat that I remember from when I started in my first couple months was that the average tenure of a professional, forget industry, just any professional, was 4.7 months, 4 years, 7 months.
Okay.
So when you were talking to hiring managers and they were talking about the candidates they wanted someone in that 5 to 7 years of tenure because they always have a greater perception than what reality was.
Hmm. Okay.
Well, pre-COVID, so this is not even taking COVID into play, but pre-COVID, that stat dropped down to 2.6 months.
Mm.
Two
Okay.
years, 6 months. We lost 2 years of average tenure at one job. Forget trying to make a number during COVID because the
Hmm.
moves that were made in every industry during COVID, whether it was a choice or whether it was burnout,
Hmm.
those numbers got thrown out the window. So I don't have the newest number, 2022 or 2023 number on that. So you have to think that that number has drastically decreased even further.
Yeah.
Well, you can't think that all those moves are made just for the almighty dollar. It's not
Mm-hmm.
just about money. It's about how they're
Mm.
valued. It's about how they're treated. Yes, money is an equation of that, but it's not the number one reason. It's part of the reason.
Yeah.
So when we talk to these candidates and we're trying to understand what makes them tick and what would make the right match, because we try to make a culture match. It's not just about skill set. The skill set should be a foregone conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
It should be about the culture match to the organization that we're working with. We try to understand what do we know about that person and why they're wanting to make a move. And just as critical, what are the details about that company and what makes them who they are?
Mm.
And again, that's not the words on the internet page that say these are our values.
Yeah.
It's what we hear directly from our questioning with the hiring manager, and just as critically, what we hear from talking to other candidates
Mm-hmm.
that work within that company. They tell us what that company's really about.
Why do you think we get this wrong? I want to try and push you to some specifics. I agree with
Mhm.
you about um, the metaphors we've used about where we're really hot and heavy at the beginning, and then we lose the discipline and the
Yep.
consistency of caring for our people and pouring into our people. I think at a high level, most people listening would agree to that. The deeper question is, well, what are the practical specific parts of it? What are we actually not doing that we should be doing? What's a good place to start?
The simplest place to start is a regular conversation, and
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I'm a marry that together with that theme of consistency.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a VP, whether it's a regional or at a national level, or you're a
Yeah.
C level, you're the owner of the organization. Do you have a game plan in place
Mm.
to talk to your key stakeholders, whether that be the EDs or the regionals, depending upon what level you're at? If
Mm-hmm.
you're an ED, talking to your community leadership team. If you're the director of nursing or resident care, all the iterated titles that we give to the head of the care side, do you have a regular plan of sequence-based communication with your team?
Mm-hmm.
A is a little bit maybe from an improvement standpoint. Here's some things that are going well. Here are some things that we need to work on. But take it beyond that to how are you?
Mm-hmm.
That magic question lets someone know that you actually care
Mm-hmm.
how they are. But there's a key to it. It can't be the flyby question. You're walking through the room and you go, "Hey, James, how you doing? How are you?"
Mm-hmm.
"Oh, good, good, good." And you're walking out the door before you really ever hear an answer.
Mm-hmm.
It actually has to be a regular, concerted basis for me to understand how are you.
Mm-hmm.
I think that can make a drastic difference in improving that person-to-person culture shift within a company.
Yeah. I'm on board here. I've got a lot of theories about this too.
Mhm.
And not just theories, these are things that we're doing in practice at our organization, Bella Groves. Um, I think our industry, for all the good that we do, we make care the product of our organizations, not the process of our organizations.
Mhm.
We sell care, we don't do care internally very well. And, when people talk about burnout, when people talk about disconnection to their leaders, I think you're right. It can be as simple as the first building block is how do we communicate? How
Yep.
often do we communicate? What do we communicate about? And that this regular communication is the foundation for a trusting relationship. And when you think about regionals, for example, this is something I never understood. There are some companies that have regionals overseeing 15, 20, 25
Yeah.
business units. And I have it at Bella Groves. I have a team of five that I regularly speak with,
Mhm.
and I have room maybe for another one or two, as our organization grows. But it's just how can you keep a deep, meaningful relationship with 15 people who
Yeah.
are looking to you for mentorship and guidance?
Well, you have to think about it. If you are that regional, you have 10 or 15 communities that you have that you're responsible for. It's not just 15 people.
Mm-hmm.
If
Mm-hmm.
you're the regional of operations,
Yeah.
okay, you're going to be talking to the every ED or administrator that's beneath you, and the sales side, and the care leader.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have 15, you got 45.
Yeah.
If you're
Yeah.
the regional of sales, you have the sales leader that is in regular interaction with you, as well as the ED, because we all know the ED is the chief salesperson in every
Mm-hmm.
community. And if they aren't, then that's other question. That's another whole other conversation we could go to
Mm-hmm.
why they aren't.
Yeah.
If you're the regional of care,
Mhm.
you have sales, you have operations.
Yeah.
So it's not just even 15, and 15 would be an extreme example. Unfortunately, more organizations have gone to larger responsibilities for their regionals as they've downsized or right sized. It would depend upon what word you want to give it
Hmm.
over the last couple of years, where it used to be 5 or 7, 10 maximum. But we've seen unfortunately an influx of regionals that have been let go because the organization is restructured. And all
Mm-hmm.
that means is that those that are still there now have even more responsibilities, making it even more challenging for them.
Yeah. It illustrates the point for me, Chris, that consistency and discipline is not just a personal values and commitment issue, it's also structural.
Mm-hmm.
If you let's take the running example, that
Yeah.
you have that every single day, but if you had seven other things that you were saying, I'm going to do seven other things every single day as well, then the bandwidth and structural issue around your day makes it a lot harder to be disciplined and consistent.
Yes.
So do you have any other like major thing in your life where you're like, every single day I'm, like rain or shine, that it has that same level of like, I'm doing this every single day? Probably not. There's
No.
probably a few things within your family, relational things, sure, but I think that our industry, especially some of the larger players, if you've structured your organization in such a way that you literally could not enhance relationships because of how things are structured,
Mm-hmm.
then that's something that we need to change as an industry, because there's a lot of disciplined people who are burning out because the structures that they work within don't allow them to naturally shine.
That's right. Yeah. Intentions are great.
Hmm.
But when you have responsibilities that take up too much of your time, paperwork, reports, those things that are necessary evils,
Hmm.
can be real hindrances to to allowing someone to do the things they really wish they can do.
Yeah, yeah. So I think we're on the same page about some conditions maybe that need to be right in order for our
Mhm.
leaders to do their best. Because we're
Yep.
talking about consistency, we're talking about discipline. So let's make an assumption here that I work for an organization, or I lead an organization where the processes and structures and procedures are set up in such a way that you can do your best work. Okay, so
Mhm.
let's make that premise available. Now, how do I think about the act of consistency and discipline? I'd really maybe just like your general thoughts on discipline as a, I don't know, skill or characteristic. I'm not sure how you might define that, but if somebody is listening and saying, "Well, I want to be more disciplined in XYZ,"
Mhm.
what's a good place to start?
The greatest place to start is, what is the smallest step you can take? And
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you an example of that from the movement side, from the running side.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Okay.
yes, I've ran every single day for more than 3 years now, but there was another habit that actually got me to that point, and that was a different challenge that a online fitness group that we were part of when the Olympics were around in 2016.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the challenges they did was building consistency for 3 weeks during the Olympics. And what they challenged you to do was to hit 10,000 steps every day
Okay.
for just 3 weeks. And basically, I would hit 10,000 steps on days that I was running 5 or 6 miles, and I wouldn't hit it on days that either I didn't run or that I was running a shorter distance. Well, that challenge started, and I had to look this up. I am now 2,655 days straight, or 7 years straight, of hitting 10,000 steps every day.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't a matter of
Mm.
running every single day. It's about movement every day. And how does that start? With when I wake up in the morning, I'm going to do the things I need to do. But I know it is not a matter of if, it is a matter of when during that day am I going to hit my 10,000 steps.
Yeah.
What do I need to do while I'm doing my job, while I'm living my life, while we're going to a play or to a sporting event, that I'm going to do that? So it really became just a very small habit
Mm-hmm.
that I had to do every single day. And
Yeah.
trust me, James, I've had to get very, very creative on days when I wasn't running.
Mm-hmm.
Taking the laundry when I'm folding it, walking each piece back and forth to the linen closet or to the drawer.
Yeah.
We've been on a cruise, and I've done laps at 11:55 p.m. because we had all the activities through the day, where I'm doing a couple extra laps of the rooms to hit my steps, because it was not a matter of if, it was simply a matter of when.
Yeah. It helps me think about the power of flexibility built into your discipline, so that you're not so rigid in your discipline of the thing. You're rigid about the activity or the practice of it, not so much I've run 2.5 miles outside on the street in my, so it's more of you're snowballing small habits into big habits.
That's right. And it all starts with steps, literally just steps.
Mm-hmm.
Well, think of how we could transition that to other parts of our life. If we had, I mean, it's the old saying on goals. I mean, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to find out what are the small things that you can do, that you could do on a religious, consistent basis, that if you build those regular habits, they will have a greater impact long-term, not just short-term, but long-term as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay. When I think about this conversation, Chris, and I'm poking holes into it as a listener who's like, I've heard all this before. If habits were as easy as this sounds, of just start small, just be consistent, it almost feels like what we're saying is just be disciplined. If you want to be disciplined, just be disciplined. And it can't be that simple. Otherwise, everybody would adopt discipline as a value in their lives. So I want to peel back. I want to make sure that this, to our listeners and for ourselves, doesn't feel like preaching from people who've figured it out. I think this is very much a process of, let's find the vulnerability in our own practices and try to help other people with it. If it was as simple enough to just say, I'm just going to do it every day, then everybody would be disciplined. So why aren't we? Why aren't we, Chris?
Life gets in the way.
Mm-hmm.
So, the biggest thing I have friends that whatever it is that they do in life, and I'll categorize it into an excuse, but it's not an excuse. It's a reality. If something happens, you're sick, you're this happened, you're going there, you have this work obligation, and you just can't get something done. And if it happens once, does that derail you? Do you remember the movie Back to the Future?
Of course.
Okay. So they talk about the alternative timeline, where that DeLorean went, and when he went back in time, he was altering the timeline.
Mm-hmm.
Well, my analogy that I use with anyone on my team or anyone that I'm coaching from a sales standpoint is, you have a choice when you get onto an alternative timeline. You can stay on it, or you could use a tether line to get back to the line, the plan that you had in place. Because we get all these disruptions over the course of every single day. I got one right now. My beautiful beagle is off to the left, whimpering a little bit, wanting me to let him outside. that's a distraction. So I could either A, go let him outside, and then I can go outside with him, and then I can play with him. And then lunch comes around. And now for the last hour, I've done this thing that took me on this alternative timeline. Or I had my target of what I wanted to get done today, my 3 or 5 things that were my must hits.
Mm-hmm.
And I can go let my beagle out. And I can go watch him go run around the yard for a little bit. But then because I know I have those 3 or 5 things that I must get done, in my head, they are not, it's not a to-do list. These are
Mm-hmm.
action items that I must get done. Because that's just how my mind is wired.
I like
So,
the reframing, Chris, from a to-do list to an action items list.
yeah.
There's power in language, and I really like that.
Yes. So it's I mean, to-do lists are awesome. And a to-do list is something that maybe you get done or maybe you don't.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have action items, and it really can't be more than 5, is my theory. And any of the people that I've listened to courses on, or podcasts, or books on, really anything more than 5 becomes unmanageable and more unrealistic. So bringing it back to that question of the simple things of, is it just as easy as just do it? It actually is, but you have to be planned for it.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just go, I might do something today. I'm not quite sure what.
Yeah.
But you actually have to be planned for it. And then
did
when life kicks you in the stomach,
mm-hmm.
you have to just be willing to make that choice of being uncomfortable or doing the hard thing and going back to the plan that you had in place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I want to note that you just said just do it, which is a throwback to Nike earlier.
That's
So
right.
you're really plugging
I know they're
for
listening. They have to
sponsorship.
be.
They've got to be. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to keep going on this thread of practical advice, and a lot of how I work, a lot of how I write and think. Someone's at my front door.
All right.
Hey, okay. We won't even edit that out. It's just life, like you said.
That's right. That's part of life, baby.
It's part of life, and distraction. Okay, going back to it though. I want to give people some practical insights. And I think that's part of these conversations, Chris, is that let's take the big picture stuff that people generally adopt as true. Small habits create big habits. And let's try to assess and create some new insights. And I think that's one of the ways that we can create new habits, is that we've got to create some neural pathways, some new pathways of thinking that ties the new behavior to some kind of an insight. So it's our job, you and I, to create some insight today. One of the things that I think about in creating more discipline in my own life is thinking about my own personal why. Mm-hmm. And I think this is something that a lot of people don't do very well when it comes to discipline. They have a lot of shoulds. So I don't know if you know Anna Hall.
Yes.
Yeah. So our friend Anna Hall would say this in her work, that there's a big difference between the things that are true to you, essential to you, and then there's all of the things that are modified with should. I should be this way. I should be X, Y, Z. And the shoulds don't bring joy and brighten up your life. They're actually weights. They're like weights tied to your ankles, and they keep you from being who you are. So I think that one of the precursors to building good discipline is a lot of self-analysis, a lot of depth finding in your own story and your why and who you are. So if you can tie habits back to what is essential about you, who you are as a person, why these new disciplines might even matter in your own life, you're more likely to value those discipline exercises. So I'm gonna give an example of this, and then kick it over to you, volley it over to your side of the net. So when you are able to tie the discipline to a big picture in your why, it took me a while to realize that there is a kind of an accepted, it's almost like the Pledge of Allegiance in senior living, that senior living gives me such purpose. Senior living is my purpose. I love working with seniors. and everybody in our industry says it.
Mhm.
So everybody who new to our industry says it, and they've adopted that this is their story, this is their narrative. It took me a while to be able to articulate and be okay with this statement, Chris. I am not passionate about senior living. The things that I am passionate about, I practice that in senior living. Senior living is not my passion. Senior living is where I practice my passion. So I'll give you an example. I am passionate about creating. It's just part of who I am. This podcast, I'm creating a podcast. When I write something on LinkedIn, I'm creating. I love to cook for my family and for my friends. That's creating. I like to write. I like to play music. These are all things that I recognize about myself. It's part of my personhood to create. And so when I can express that in senior living, something that I love, I'm not passionate about it. I'm passionate about creating. But if I can do the thing that I'm passionate about in the relationships that I have in my life, part of which is my profession, then I am more fulfilled as a result of that. So for me, the discipline of LinkedIn, I tie that back to creation. It's artistry, it's creating, it's becoming a better version of myself by practicing the art of writing. And so it's a lot easier for me to stick with, okay, I'm going to try to make one post a day. I don't always make it, I'm not perfect at it, but I'm consistent with the behavior because I understand how it is expressing part of my personhood. And it's not tied to senior living, it's just where I uh, where where I practice that passion. Does that make sense? How does that ring with you?
No, that absolutely does make sense, and that's really interesting to hear because you are right that 98% of the people in the industry will say I'm passionate about senior living,
Of course,
and
yeah.
really they're everyone says it, but really they're passionate about something else, and
Mm-hmm,
senior living is the conduit to get them there, or it's just a job.
mm-hmm,
So, I mean, I think about that from my side. I mean, I think of myself of things that I'm truly passionate about. Am I passionate about running? Or am I passionate about well-being? Am I passionate about senior living, or am I passionate about helping people?
mm-hmm.
So recruiting is what I do. And I can truly say that I'm passionate about recruiting, but not because of the practice of recruiting, but because
Mm-hmm.
of the end result.
Yeah.
I mean, the end result of what I get to do in this business is we get to help companies grow and we get to directly impact people's lives. That's pretty darn cool.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you scrape it down, I'm a salesperson.
Mm-hmm.
And as a salesperson, there are thousands of things that I could sell.
Yep.
But when we have the ability to do those two things, and now I get to add that third component of not only do I get to help companies grow, I get to directly impact people's lives, but I also get to be able to help the lives of the seniors that the people we're placing are helping.
Right.
That is really adds that cherry on top.
Mm-hmm.
But when I look at all those things and what makes me happy for being me, it's really my ability and my at least my hope to provide just a little bit of inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
And some of that's done through my work, some of that's done through my running, some of that's done through the crazy challenges that I try to do. And I have friends that say, I would never do that. You're crazy for doing that. But then they're inspired by it. That gets me going.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right. I think this conversation that we're having, Chris, and this practice of digging further into your story. I'd venture to guess that this type of conversation you don't have every day, right? We don't
No,
have
well, most
this.
people ask a surface question, they get a surface answer,
Yeah.
and they're good with it. So I
Yeah.
love how you're peeling the onion back.
Yeah. And well, it's the peeling of that reveals, oh, okay, there's a new level of this, and I can't quite answer it readily. And it's something that I practice, and it's something that I teach in sales, actually. So just piggybacking off of your cue, most of us sell something.
Mhm.
And actually, all of us sell something. I'm gonna rephrase that. All of us sell something. Just some of us do it better than others because we understand that sales is a service.
Mhm.
So because sales is a service, some of us are a lot better at it. But everybody today sells something.
That's right.
Um, one of the things that I teach in sales is that I get a lot of questions about how do I know that I've done enough discovery? Do I ask 2 questions,
Mhm.
3 questions, 4 questions, 5 questions? And people are looking for a number because they're looking for a form. They're looking for a form that says, did I do a good enough discovery understanding Chris's needs? And they're looking for a concrete answer. So, one of the things that I've been able to kind of understand and figure out and share back with people is that when you ask a question, uh, you can literally count in your head how much time it takes for that person to start articulating their response. So if I ask you, Chris, what do you do for work? You tell me your response within about a
Mhm.
second, right? Like, great. What do you love about your work? Then you'll start to probably immediately tell me a response to that. Okay, so you love these things about your work. Well, of those, which one really speaks to you? Okay. Now I'm gonna have to start thinking about
Mhm.
that, right? So you maybe have 2, 3, 4 seconds pause, and then you pick one. Like that's a really interesting choice. That surprises me. Tell me more about that.
Yep.
Okay, now you really have to go even further and start articulating things that you haven't had to articulate out loud. For me, I know that I've done enough discovery when there is a significant pause between the question and the answer. And it's
Uh-huh.
not a 5, 6, 7 second thing. But generally, if I'm looking for a rule of thumb, I'm looking for something that's like, I'm going to have to really think about that.
Yep.
Whatever the response is after that modifier of I haven't had to think about that before, or I'm not really sure. That probably is in depth enough that you have created at least a relationship with that person, and now you're onto something. That is the true need. So with your own story, as we're having this conversation, I would say that if you're peeling back the layers of your own onion and you're like, okay, what are my main motivators? What are the things that I'm passionate about? If
Mhm.
not senior living, what is it that I'm actually passionate about? You can just keep drilling down and asking those questions. And when you get to that point where you have to pause for about 5 to 7 seconds to start your response, you're
Mhm.
probably pretty close to where you need to be.
Yeah, that's really, really a powerful way to think about that. I mean, and when you're saying that, what I'm thinking in my head is those are the psychology based questions. The tell me more. What do you mean by that? I mean,
Hmm.
I'm not talking about the how does that make you feel, but the ones just to get somebody to have to think,
Hmm.
and having to think really is going to get to either the truth or is going to say, I don't know a good answer for that.
Yeah.
And that's really where you got the truth.
That's really exciting when you get to the point of like, I don't know the response to that. That means
Yeah.
that you've created a new pathway for thinking that you didn't
Yep.
currently have.
That's right. So I
Yeah.
love that.
Pulling back to the discipline, then it really is if you're able to understand your own motivations and your own story, like what I just told you about. I've figured out that one of the things I'm very passionate about is creating. Now that I know that, everything else that I do ties to that, and I've got a
Mhm.
few other things that I understand about myself. But the practice of discipline, in particular new discipline, I'm far more likely to succeed in that endeavor if I'm able to understand this is why I need this discipline,
Yep.
because it feeds my personhood.
That's right. If you could reverse engineer it, and as you call it, to understand really what your why is, but
Hmm.
break that down of what that why is, and then break it down to why is that important?
Yep.
What is it going to take for me to do that, to have more meaning, to give more of my why?
Yep.
Then those mundane things that you have to do day in, day out, they become less mundane
Hmm.
because they're there to build that bigger equation to get you closer to the why, to get you to be able to do more of the things that you like to do. You still got to do the things you may not like to do. But if you know what you're really trying to accomplish, and as you're describing it, the more ways that you can create, the
Hmm.
more passionate you're going to be.
Yeah.
So if there are 10 things you need to do, 3 of them you wish you never had to do, but you still have to do. 3 of them you don't mind doing, but you wish that someone else would do them. And then 3 or 4 of them are the real magic makers. Then those other 6 aren't as bad
Yeah.
because you get to do those 3 or 4 things that are the magic makers.
Yeah. Absolutely. We got to figure out the threads of what are going to be the magic makers for ourselves. It's not anyone else's responsibility to give us that. We have to do the inner work to be able to determine these are the things that drive me. And therefore, now I can start having some clues as to what disciplines will serve that
Mhm.
inner purpose. And I think maybe
That's right.
that's one of the ways I'd articulate it based on our conversation is that when people fail at creating new discipline in their lives, I believe it is because they're trying to create discipline around purpose, or actually create disciplines around process instead of
Mhm.
disciplines around purpose.
That's right. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, you need to have systems, but if the system is there just for the sake of working the system and you don't understand the why, you don't understand the
Hmm.
bigger picture, the likelihood of success, big picture success, is rarely going to be there.
Yeah, yeah. And I would encourage people to think of big picture as your big picture, not the
That's right.
company's big picture, but your big picture. So let's give a real practical example of this. If there's a regional director of sales listening to this call and saying at the beginning of the episode, I really want to get more disciplined around making sure that my executive directors send in their sales reports every single week.
Mhm.
That's a discipline around a process, and that process, if it's completely apart from you and what drives you and what connects you to that job, all you're trying to do is to create a hack around a process that somebody else put in place for you,
Yep.
right? But if you're like, what I really want to do, I love being able to help people perform at their best. I love the motivation. I get up in the morning and I think about, I'm going to help Chris, and I'm going to help Mary, and I'm going to help
Mhm.
Jude, and I'm going to help all of these people to be better at their job and to bring more enrichment into their lives. Okay, then I at least know the thing that drives me is not sales reports, it's coaching.
Mhm.
Okay, then you ask the question around, how can I create discipline around the practices of coaching? That I think is probably a stronger lead into the discipline, rather than how do I want to get better at sales reports and getting those back to me. You reframe that into, how do I get better at coaching so that I can help people improve, which is really what floats my boat.
Yeah, and I'm gonna take that one step further of thinking about that example of those 10 things you got to do and the 3 or 4 things you really wish you
Hmm.
didn't have to do. And one of those might be the asking for the sales report every week or the reminding them of that. The more that you could automate some of those things, the more time you have to
Mm.
spend on the things
Hmm.
that you really
Hmm.
want to do. So if you could set up in whatever email platform that you use an automated email that goes out every week
Yep.
at 4 p.m. on Friday, because you know the report's got to be turned in by 5, and you don't have to think about it. It's set and forget.
Yeah.
Still a task you got to do, but you don't have to work, spend time on it. That gives you more time to do some of that coaching and
Mm.
using your example.
Yeah. So, what you're saying here is that not all things that we believe are discipline matters are actually discipline. Some things are just automation. Some things are,
Yeah.
there really are some things that you can probably separate out as, okay, this is a process issue. This is not a personal discipline issue. So I need to create processes, automations, procedures that help with the consistency of this behavior.
Yep.
And then you can really pull back from that. Okay, there are 2 or 3 things now that are actually discipline based things, like, how do I
Yep.
get better at coaching? How do I check in on the person, not just their performance? Those are things then that you can um, differentiate between automation and processes
Yep.
and creating better discipline.
Yeah, I'm thinking of another example that I like to talk to my team about, and
Hmm.
that's kind of and I'm gonna correlate it to the hiring side. Remember, I talked about those 2 sides: finding the people and then keeping the people.
Yep.
So a cleanup Friday is a very simple practice. You've probably heard about it in all kinds of different or not sales
Hmm.
management, time management techniques
Hmm.
of having the checklist of all the things that you want to get done before you walk away
Okay.
from your desk on Fridays so
Sure.
that you could go into the weekend or go into your next week fully prepared and you have those things off the list, right?
Yeah. The clean
Well, think
desk.
about from a hiring standpoint. And the more you can put yourself in the shoes of the candidates that you're interviewing, doesn't matter what the role is. But if you were in those shoes, how would you want to be treated? And Connecting one other thread that we've talked about, which is communication. If you were the candidate and you were excited about the opportunity, and this interviewing process is going on for 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 weeks,
Mm-hmm.
and you haven't heard anything in a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, if you were that candidate, would you really be excited about this opportunity?
Yeah, definitely not.
No. So something you could do to bring all those things together from that Cleanup Friday standpoint is have a list of every candidate you have in process. And it could also be connected, bolted onto an automation tool if you really wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
But a simple email out saying, hey, we're interested in you still, but we're still going through our interview process. I hope to have feedback for you no later than, always give yourself a buffer. If it really is Tuesday, give yourself a buffer of Thursday. Because
Mm-hmm.
things, again, life happens, right? But if you did that for every person, the likelihood of you not losing one of those candidates because you were consistent in that process, you had that Cleanup Friday practice of making sure that every candidate was touched. Think of how more impactful that could be to those people. And for what you're trying to do of actually trying to hire somebody, you're exponentially increasing your likelihood that
Yeah.
that person's going to see the practice that you're following, that discipline that you created for regular communication, that maybe, just maybe, that's how you're going to communicate with me when I'm on the job. That
Yeah.
even if you don't have an update for me, you're still communicating with me.
I really like this way of thinking that disciplines around even follow-up. So in this example of recruiting, it just made me think about something that I do as a leader who hires other leaders that I didn't quite know how to articulate until this conversation. So I want to share it with you, get your thoughts. I think that so let's say I recently, well, not recently, about 6 months ago, as of the date of this podcast recording, we were hiring a new executive director for Bella Groves.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's obviously a critical position for us. We're a brand new business. We're trying to change the way that we're doing dementia care, et cetera, et cetera. So we knew that we had to hire a really special person into this role.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that there was a practical limitation in my ability to properly screen every single candidate that was coming through. And so I actually don't focus too much on, if there are 100 candidates who apply for the role, I think that there's this kind of FOMO mindset of like, okay, I looked at the first 5. This one looks pretty good. Man, there's 95 other applicants here. Let me just keep going. And so I know that this is a trap that hiring managers fall into, especially if there's a lot of candidates for that role, is that, grass is greener syndrome of, this candidate feels good, but I feel like there's probably another one out there, or there's another one out there.
Mm-hmm.
And so, at least for myself, right or wrong, what I look at is, okay, I have a good enough sample size. There are 5, 6, 7 candidates that I've spoken with by phone. We've gone through the first level. There's 2 or 3 that feel really kind of special and connected, and then we advance to some people. I didn't realize I did this, but I actually, there's probably 70% of candidates who applied for that role that I didn't even get a chance to talk to.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't because I didn't want to talk to them. It's because I wanted to give the courtesy of my full undivided attention to the people that I was actually considering. And so in the end, we hired an amazing executive director, and she wouldn't have fit all of the normal criteria of, senior living experience and, connections in the industry, et cetera, et cetera. But you've responded to a couple of my posts or videos about this, but I have a very specific structure of what I'm looking for when I recruit for leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been able to break that down into skills fit, learning fit, team fit, and culture fit. And there are some specific criteria.
Yeah, like
there.
I think we talked about in one of our exchanges. It's a terrible acronym, but
it's
it
a terrible
works.
acronym. Yeah, it's a terrible acronym. But in the end, it's so ingrained in my thinking now: skills fit, learning fit, team fit, culture fit. And I have very practical exercises to get to the heart of that assessment in each of those categories. But the executive director we hired is phenomenal. And if we would have looked at those other 70% of the candidates who applied, I almost certainly would have lost out on her because of the delay of how long it would have taken.
Mhm.
So I don't know if that's right or wrong, but I can tell you it led to the right result. Um, I'm going to volley that back over to you for assessment, thought, analysis. What do you think when I share that with you?
Well, a couple different things is don't beat yourself up too much of not talking to the or looking at the other 70, because the reality is you put an ad out there, whether it's an executive director, sales director, or a caregiver, you're going to get a lot of candidates that just are not a fit for the job.
Hmm.
So the that quantity of 100 applicants for the role, you probably only had 20 that were worth spending your time on. And it's unfortunate to say, but it's just the reality that we're in.
Yeah.
Forget the new technology with AI tools that literally can send your resume if you were an applicant. It can
Hmm.
send it out to 10,000 jobs in 5 minutes. They don't care whether you apply. They're simply going for volume. There's an article about this over the weekend that I read about. That
Yeah.
it's just
It's
volume.
crazy.
Yeah. So forget about that and just think about it from the standpoint of you have to be selfish for one moment, and that's the time that you spend. There's only so much time you have in the day.
Yeah.
So you didn't need to look at all 100 to find the one that you wanted. And that's a very beneficial thing. Not very many organizations get that fortunate. I don't want to say
Hmm.
lucky because it wasn't luck, it was how your process went.
Yeah.
But not get that fortunate to be able to find the right person in the first 5 or 7 people that they look at.
Yeah.
So
It.
scrape away the misfits for a moment
Hmm.
and just look at the time it would take for you to talk to 20 people. Even let's just say in a perfect world, utopia, there are
Hmm.
20 out of that 100, which is really not true.
Yeah.
You still don't have enough time to do so.
Hmm.
And it doesn't make those people bad. It doesn't make you bad. You have to work within the time that you're working with. But connecting that back to my description of the communication side is, of those 5 or 7, did you ensure that all of them were being kept in the loop on a systematic, disciplined, consistent
Hmm.
basis until you reach conclusion of who you were going to hire?
Yes.
That's a great thing to be able to say, because
Yeah.
very few hiring managers can say that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's the something I've really grabbed a hold of ever since we started Bella Groves about a year and a half ago is that it's a mindset thing about leadership, and you can what your mindset is about an issue or an opportunity completely dictates how that opportunity ends up, reconciling how it
Mhm.
concludes. And so, the easier way of saying this is that having a positive forward thinking mindset versus a glass half full kind of, or glass half empty kind of mindset, it makes a huge difference into how you work and what comes to you. And so for us, realizing that we are a small business without the resources of large senior living industry examples out there, the glass half empty way to look at that is, gosh, we don't have the marketing budget, we don't have the recruiting budget, we don't have et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the restrictive nature, the confines of the task in front of you forces you to be more disciplined, and
Mhm.
it forces you to be more creative.
Yeah.
So we don't have a 20, 30, $40,000 marketing budget for our community. We've got a pretty small one.
Mhm.
But it means that we have to be more creative with the ads. It means we have to be more creative with our content. And that means we have to distill our message into the smallest part, the why of that message.
Mhm.
And so you may have seen this, but that the billboard that we
Yeah.
put up at the very beginning, "Love is greater than dementia,"
Yeah.
we had to distill it down into the simplest part of it, and we had to be creative with it. I mean, it was about 25% or so of our total marketing budget, and it was a billboard.
Yeah.
But I can't tell you how many times that families and candidates who ended up working with us have referenced that billboard. And
Mhm.
so we take that practice of, okay, the limitations are your advantage. That's the mindset. The limitations are your advantage if you are disciplined and creative around this. So recruiting for an executive director, hiring for key positions in the community, What's the limitation of that process? I have one person, me, who can look through that.
Hmm.
So what is the discipline that I have to have around it? Well, I have to have a very specific criteria for what I'm looking for, and then I have to have the discipline to move forward once I've found that person. So that shiny penny, grass is greener, FOMO mindset that some people have, you just have to be able to shelf that for the benefit of your organization and say, good enough leads to great. And
Hmm.
I think that is the discipline missing in a lot of our industry.
It's so funny that you say that exact line, James, because my recruiting partner Blake, he talks to me about that multiple times when we're
Mm.
working with a company and they have a candidate that they really like, but they're always wondering if there's just somebody else out there.
Mm-hmm.
And he'll always say, "Don't let great stand in the way of good enough."
Mm-hmm.
And from a recruiting standpoint, you want a slam dunk, you want a grand slam candidate, but sometimes you need someone who can hit a double.
Yeah. We're
And
talking Moneyball now.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
The movie, the book.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, the reality is a lot of roles now have been filled. The number of purely from a leadership standpoint, not necessarily from
Mm-hmm.
the incredible a reverse scale that we have of those that we need for the non-leadership roles, the care
Yeah.
roles, the dining roles, and every other role that's so critical to the success of a community. But from a leadership standpoint, a good portion of those are now filled.
Mm-hmm.
But the question that you have to ask is, are they filled with the best person or just someone who's good enough?
Mm-hmm.
And you, as the owner of Bella Groves and the leaders of other organizations, have the ability to actually have a more of a strategic thought process
Mm-hmm.
of, do I have the right people on the bus, or is there someone that could drive this bus a little bit better? I'm using
Mm.
that the Jim Collins analogy from Good to
Sure.
Great again. So it's a unique opportunity to be able to top grade, but that's going to take time for organizations to go through those processes.
Yeah.
I know it's a little off topic from some of the things we're talking about, but you saying
Mm.
that good, don't let great stand in the way of good, really brought that thought to my mind.
Yeah, I think it all relates together, Chris. That and I want to clarify here that I don't think of my executive director or any other team member that we hired as, yeah, okay, or just good enough.
Mhm.
I think I'm just good enough as a CEO or as a co-founder for our organization, Bella Groves. If you think about it, and you just look at, there was a list of candidates that you had in front of you, and there's 10 candidates, and I'm on that list, and there are 9 other people who have startup experience, founder
Mhm.
experience, lots of money and backing, et cetera, et cetera. James Lee, relative to that list, it's like, okay, well, James is good enough, but good enough gets you to great. So I in no way think that good enough is a disparaging comment. It is a positive, optimistic mindset that great doesn't exist as a
Mhm.
candidate or a starting point. Good enough is the best that we're going to get, and in fact, it's part of the tagline to my consulting and coaching work for Bearwise is be good. Sorry, I got it wrong. It's the tagline of Bearwise: be great at good.
Mhm.
And what it really means is, if you're kind of reframing even the Jim Collins book, which everybody in our industry seems to know that,
Yeah.
obviously as well, right seat on the right bus. Good to great. The one issue I have with respect to Mr. Collins, I hope you're not listening. Um, it feels
No,
like
remember,
it's
only
a
Nike's listening.
only Nike's looking. With respect to Mr. Collins, the one issue I have about it is that it frames um, progress as a linear step from good to great. First you're here, now you have to move to great. But for me, especially in senior living, good. Like if you think about the word good, would you like to be described as Chris is a good person?
Absolutely.
He has goodness,
Yep.
right? What do we produce? We produce goodwill, not great will,
Hmm.
goodwill. Good is, I think, human endeavor. We aspire to be good, not great. I think great has created this false kind of pursuit of perfection. It to me, you're almost creating a synonym for perfectionism of great. Instead of saying perfect, we're saying great.
Uh-huh.
So I want us to be great as an adjective, not a noun. I know we're getting way off topic here, but for me, great is an adjective to good. We can be greater at good, but good is really the ultimate outcome for leaders, I believe, especially in senior living. So that's what I mean by all of this. When I say good enough for me is the highest qualitative descriptor I could give to a candidate or myself. Good enough is who we are, and that's the reality. So if we can accept that, if we can move forward with it, we can work towards greatness together. But good enough is actually the highest compliment I could pay to anybody.
It's interesting you say that. And I'll reframe what I said a little bit differently as well.
Hmm.
That when organizations look at people that, oh, they're good, but they may not be great, the thing that we look for is the skill set needs to be good enough, but the
Hmm.
whole person may be the right fit because of what they're passionate about, because of their work ethic. Work ethic is not a skill; it's more of a being. So when I look at that, when
Mm.
you don't let great stand in the way of good, and you taking it back to your analogy, it's do they have the 60% of the skill set? And can they make up for that because of their personality, because of their work ethic, because of their desires, because of their
Mm.
goals? Those things can make that person truly great. And I wholeheartedly agree with you on that it's too much of a linear line. And it's that old saying that I don't believe that we're ever in a destination mindset. It's a
Yeah.
journey mindset.
Yeah.
So you're never going to get to great if you're equating great to be perfect, because no
Yeah.
one's ever going to be perfect.
Yeah.
But you can always aspire to be a little bit better every day.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. That's right. It's when I take that very terrible acronym of my leadership hiring matrix, but when we break that down pretty simply here, we're looking for skills fit, which is competency. Do you have the competency or the baseline foundational
Mhm.
skill set to do the work that this requires? Learning fit goes to that next level of,
Yep,
okay, well, whatever skills gap you have, is there compatibility between Chris the candidate and James, his potential coach?
that's right.
So we're looking for not just do you like to learn? That's not the right question. It's more about compatibility between how you learn and how I teach. That's what we're looking for in that
Mhm.
in that quadrant. And then you move to team, which is okay. Now that there's a competency check, there is a learning um, congruence between you and I. Now we need to put you in the team environment. And is there the vibe check, right?
Mhm.
Is there a fit in terms of, okay, these people uh, mesh well together?
Right.
And I think that's such an important part that people don't take into consideration. They just look at the resume, they don't look at the interpersonal dynamic of what that person is going to be like as part of your team that's performing
Mhm.
together. And then the culture is the alignment of why. Does their why match our organization's why? And that's a
Mhm.
lot harder to be able to ascertain. But if you look at those four, do they have the skills fit? Do they have the learning fit? Do they have the team fit? And now the culture fit? That gives me a total fit score of, okay, Chris is about a 90% between these four quadrants. This is good enough.
Yep.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. Um, Man, we went through a lot of topics. I
We
think
did.
this is like three different episodes. I may have to chop it up, huh? Let's bring it home
Yes.
because I think your beagle needs to go outside.
Ha, my wife came and got him, so we're good.
Hey, okay. Well, we'll wrap up just the same. Man, I first of all, I got to say this has been a fun conversation, and it makes me think we need to talk more.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. I really enjoyed this. I
let's
love
have
how you
some.
have broken things down.
Yeah, well, I think it's part of the whole premise of Level Up, as a leadership podcast, is that let's break things down into their smaller parts. And these type of conversations never happen for me inside organizations that I worked for.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's the value of podcasts and LinkedIn and newsletters is let's get these conversations out there, because listening to this episode isn't going to make somebody better at discipline or consistency, but it will give them the new perspectives, the
Yep.
insights and aha moments to be able to start working in that direction.
That's right.
So
That's right.
I think this is one of the ways to serve our industry, is that we have to take time to do these things. So I know before we hit record, Chris, you talked about having the desire to create a podcast for your own efforts, your own
Mm-hmm.
organization, or just you as a thought leader. And so I'd give you the same advice of if you want to create the discipline around that, when you can tie it to your personhood, your why,
Mm-hmm.
I think the discipline around that is going to be a lot easier. And so I hope that people who listen to this episode stop blaming themselves, or give themselves a little bit more credit if you haven't been able to build the right, quote unquote, right disciplines that you're looking for. It's not a matter of how disciplined are you, the character of you. I really think it's more of a misalignment of, do you understand your story and motivations well enough so that you have the right disciplines building to support that?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's one little element that has such a profound impact on it, and that's the words that you say. And you actually talked about that a little bit ago. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to put that into the mindset category.
Yeah.
The words that you speak to yourself, that you internalize, whether you're actually thinking them or saying them, make a
Mm.
big difference in whether you're going to be disciplined, whether you're going to have the consistency. And a really powerful story that comes to mind when I think about that. Do you know who Jesse Itzler is?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
He was supposed to be at one of the conferences
He
we
was supposed to be the
attended.
original speaker, but unfortunately, he
Yeah.
got deathly sick from basketball camp at Duke. Uh, so,
That's right.
uh, so he talked about a story. He's incredibly successful on himself, an incredible ultra endurance athlete. So I
Mm-hmm.
started following because of that, but keep following because of the mindset content that he puts out there. But he talked about when he first started in business, he was writing jingles. And
Mm-hmm.
he wrote this jingle for the New York Knicks called Go New York, Go New York, Go. And he was down to his last $1,000. And he went to dinner with, I think it was one of his roommates. I might be altering the story a little bit, but the content, the message is still there. That he was going to dinner with one of his roommates, and his roommate's father was a very successful business person. And Jesse was offered from someone who was being pretty creative, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
Devious might be another way of putting it. But this guy knew that Jesse was getting desperate. And Jesse said he had $1,000 to his name. So this guy offered Jesse $10,000. But what he wanted in writing was 10% of his lifetime earnings.
Lifetime earnings?
Lifetime earnings.
Ooh,
So I will
wow.
get you out of this pickle of you got $1,000 left to your name, but you're going to give me 10% of everything you're in for the rest of your life. Well, Jesse was seriously thinking about it. Timing worked out that he was going to dinner with this roommate and got talking to his roommate's dad, who was a very successful business person. And the dad asked Jesse, will you make this business work if you don't take the money? And Jesse started going off on, well, yeah, I know I can. I know I'm going to be successful. I just know I can do this. And the dad pounded his hand on the desk and said, I didn't ask if you could. I asked, will you?
Mm-hmm.
And Jesse realized how powerful one word change was. So I've heard this story over the last couple of years, but for some reason it's really, really resonated with me over the last couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So practically every morning when I wake up, I am like, I will be successful. I will do this and this. Not I can or I should, but I will.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that mindset shift and that word change in my head will make a difference in me continuing not to be just to be consistent in running, but to be consistent in everything else I want to do because of that mindset shift.
Yeah. I am certain there's somebody listening to this right now who's probably having the same thought of making this quote about do or do not. There is no try.
Hey, Yoda is the wisest of them all, isn't he?
Yoda is the wisest of them all. Man, this is really good. I hope this has been a helpful podcast episode for the ones who listen. I don't know, the 50 people who listen to Level Up podcast. But that's the thing about content marketing, is that this is here for good now. And so
That's right.
I hope, Chris, that when we are friends 10 years down the road from now, we can listen back to this episode and be like, hey, that was some good stuff back there, but we've evolved a little bit. Let's update that episode. And that is the spirit of Level Up, is that this is not a finite, okay, now check, I've got that competency. This is just this is a kind of a time capsule of our leadership mindset and our thinking. So this is who we are today. We will evolve tomorrow, 1 year from now, 10 years from now. And so I hope that listeners, and for you and for me, that is our journey of learning, is that this is just one add to today, but keep going. Have the discipline of continuing to learn. Start small, snowball your learning. And at the end of the day, I hope that people also realize that senior living, while you may be great at it, it is not your passion. Your passion and your purpose and your story is something outside of it. And that part is what we have to bring to senior living. The thing that we love, we have to bring our passion to it. If we don't have the right mindset around it, we'll fail. We will fail because we tie too much of our identity to this thing that we claim gives us purpose. Our purpose brightens our work. And I hope
the industry is the cherry on top. It's just the cherry on top.
Yeah. Good to see you today, Chris. I hope.
You as well, buddy.
Have you run today? Did you already run?
Absolutely.
Okay. You started. I was going to say, let's sign off and you go run, but you already did that. All right, man. Good to see you today, and hope I'll be having my next conversation with you a lot sooner than the last gap that we had.
That's right. It's been an absolute pleasure, James.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of the Level Up Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing to the podcast and its YouTube channel. Better yet, share it with someone you know who is on their own leadership development journey. I hope you'll be back for the next episode of Level Up. But until then, I hope that you are leading well, and remember that you are living your legacy today. So, make it a good one.